The light switch clicked off for the last time. Same soft sound it made 20 years ago when I first walked into that cramped corner office with the flickering bulbs and somebody else's coffee stains on the carpet. Now it was all glass walls and ergonomic everything, with a nameplate that read James Patterson, Chief Systems Architect for about 10 more seconds. I'm Jim, 47 years old, and I just got fired from the company I built from the ground up. Behind me, my desk plant looked as wilted as I felt. The framed photo of me with the original co-founders sat crooked on the shelf, knocked askew by the cleaning crew last month. I never bothered fixing it. Maybe I knew this was coming. The hallway buzzed with that fake busy energy you get when people are pretending they don't know what just happened. When you've been somewhere as long as I have, your name becomes the kind of whisper that makes managers squint at org charts and new hires try to Google your background, but you can disappear with one sentence from HR. One rehearsed, sanitized corporate sentence. "The exit is behind you," Chase said, grinning like he'd just won something. "But we'll get to him in a minute. It's weird leaving a job you practically raised from nothing." When I joined TechFlow Systems, the whole operation ran out of a converted garage that smelled like energy drinks and desperation. The server was literally sitting on a folding table next to someone's motorcycle. I wrote the first line of what became a $500 million fleet management software suite on a borrowed laptop while a neighbor's dog barked through the walls. I didn't just build the system, I was the system. From the GPS tracking protocols to the route optimization engine to the DOT compliance modules we eventually scaled for Fortune 500 clients. I built it like it was the child I never had time for. While other departments threw happy hours, I stayed behind writing patches and training every new CTO who walked in thinking they were the next tech genius. 3 CEOs came and went, some decent, some dumber than a box of rocks. But none of them ever questioned my place. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud. But when the system crashed at 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve, or when the federal audit team showed up unannounced, guess who they called? Me. I saw mergers, lawsuits, IPO talks, divorces. I even watched someone accidentally delete the entire customer database and somehow blame it on legacy infrastructure. Every time, quietly and efficiently, I fixed it. I kept things running while others played dress-up in corner offices. Then Chase Holloway showed up. Chase was the kind of guy who says, "Let's circle back like it's a power move," and wears cologne that smells like burning ambition. Private equity installed him to modernize us, which really meant cut anything that wasn't shiny and new. I was neither. To him, I was legacy code in human form. He swaggered in with his laminated buzzwords and PowerPoint decks full of synergistic optimization and cloud-native revolutions. I asked him once what a Kubernetes cluster was, just for fun. He said, "I don't get into the weeds," which is CEO speak for. I Googled it and still don't understand. Still, I smiled, nodded, did my job, kept the trucks moving, until this morning. He called me into his office with HR flanking him like gargoyles. Janet and Parker, Team Beige, laptops already open, expressions preloaded with fake concern. "Jim," he said, "like we were old fishing buddies. We're restructuring. Time for fresh blood. You've had a good run." 20 years, I said flatly, just so he had to feel the weight of it. He smiled wider, mistaking acknowledgement for agreement. Right, 20 incredible years. But we're entering a new phase. Modernization. Unfortunately, that means restructuring some legacy positions. I watched his mouth move, but my brain focused on the framed poster behind him. Our software's first interface, version 1.0, the one I built in my basement workshop with my dog sleeping at my feet and classic rock playing on an old radio, the one they now bragged about in shareholder presentations. Chase had no idea he was firing the guy who designed the architecture. "You've had a good run," he finished, like he was handing me a participation trophy. Parker leaned forward with his rehearsed script. "We'll offer generous severance. 2 months full salary, Cobra access, outplacement services." "Roger that," I said and stood up. Just like that. No questions, no protests, no asking who they thought could maintain 20 years of custom code. No warning that the IP agreement they never bothered updating was about to cost them a 9-figure panic attack. Parker blinked. Janet's eyes narrowed. Chase tilted his head like a confused dog. They expected tears, maybe desperate pleading. What they got was military calm, so steady it became unsettling. "Jim," Chase said slowly, "anything you want to ask?" I thought about it for exactly 1 heartbeat. Then I said, "Nope," and walked out. The hallway felt colder than it should. People glanced at me, then quickly away like eye contact might get them fired too. I'd trained half these kids, debugged their code, approved their vacation requests when their managers were off playing golf at strategic retreats. I took the long route to my office. Wanted them to see, not to gloat, just to witness. Once inside, I shut the door and grabbed my stuff. Didn't pack much. My personal laptop, the red leather binder from my filing cabinet, and the coffee mug my 16-year-old daughter gave me that said, "World's okayest dad." The mug had a hairline crack that caught the light just right. Fitting. I left everything else. Let some intern inherit my technical manuals. Let Chase keep the group photo from our IPO celebration, back when they called me the backbone of operations. I zipped up my bag, walked out without a word, and took the stairs. Didn't want to share an elevator with someone pretending they didn't know what just happened. Outside, the California wind cut sharp. I didn't flinch. Walked to my truck, turned off my phone mid-buzz, and sat in silence. Let them panic. Let the servers fail. Let Chase think he just executed a clean win. He didn't know yet, but he would. There's a difference between silence and surrender. One of them comes with a lawyer. My phone was the first to go dark. Powered off mid-notification, mid-email, mid-whatever crisis they thought I should fix for free. The screen dimmed like it was finally relieved of duty. I slid it into the glove compartment next to my old service medals. I didn't drive home. I drove to Murphy's Bar, the kind of place with chipped wood tables and bartenders who knew when to pour and when to shut up. Ordered a whiskey neat and pulled out the red leather binder. The bartender, Danny, raised an eyebrow. "Rough day, Jim?" "Getting better," I said. Inside that binder lived 20 years of carefully maintained documentation. The kind of paperwork most people forget about until lawyers start asking questions. I opened to the first tab. Initial IP agreement. Tech Flow Systems. James Patterson, dated 2 decades ago, signed with a pen that had since died in my workshop drawer. Back in year 1, we were 4 guys sharing a borrowed conference room and 1 broken coffee machine. I wrote every line of code myself. The founders knew it. They couldn't pay salary that first summer because they were burning investor money just to keep the lights on. So instead, we agreed on paper, notarized, scanned, and backed up to 3 different drives, that the intellectual property would remain mine. Specifically, ownership of source code, libraries, and compiled executables shall remain with author J. Patterson until full equity conversion is completed and documented in writing. They called it a placeholder. Said we'd update it when we went legit. Except we never did. Oh sure, we incorporated, hired real lawyers, built client relationships with major shipping companies. But that clause, the handoff, never got cleaned up. Too much momentum, too many shiny distractions. Chase's predecessors probably assumed it was already done. Chase himself wouldn't recognize a legal landmine if it exploded in his LinkedIn notifications. I flipped to the second tab, email chain from 2008, where I reminded the co-founders, "We still need to revisit IP assignment. I'm not incorporated into the Master Software Trust yet." Their reply, "We'll loop in legal when we have bandwidth. For now, thanks for keeping us moving." Bandwidth. That was their word for "we'll conveniently forget this exists." I kept everything. Every reminder, every deflection, every corporate soon. The binder wasn't just evidence. It was a time machine. Every page reminded me of late nights debugging APIs while my ex-wife complained about missed dinners, of negotiating our first major client contract while the CFO stress vomited in the bathroom. There it all was, a living record that said, "You built the skyscraper, but I still own the foundation." I sipped my whiskey and opened my personal laptop, the one I bought myself, the one no company could ever take back. Opened my email to Jeffrey Walsh at Walsh & Associates. Subject: IP assignment and licensing rights. "Jeff, ready to talk? Just had an interesting morning. Let's set up a call." I attached scans of the key binder sections and hit send. Then I closed the laptop and just breathed. No alerts, no Slack emergencies, no performance reviews written by people who couldn't spell API. Outside, San Jose traffic hummed past. Inside, I watched a guy at the bar try to impress his date with stories about cryptocurrency. The world kept turning. They thought they deleted me with a 6-minute meeting in corporate doublespeak, but they didn't know I kept receipts. And every clause was a fuse waiting for the right spark. At 10:23 a.m., the East Coast shipping portal timed out mid-session for 6 major logistics coordinators trying to track holiday freight. 5 minutes later, the insurance claims processor flagged 4 critical errors, module X032 not responding. By 10:31, a government contractor from DC left an angry voicemail for customer success. Why can't we access the compliance dashboard you promised? The thing about enterprise software is it doesn't explode with a bang. It dies quietly, then all at once. At 10:39, someone in IT, probably Kevin, judging by the panicked diagnostic logs hitting the backup servers, realized the authentication flow wasn't just stalling, it was locked down tight. The back end was rejecting credentials like a bouncer with a grudge. Error, permission denied, insufficient clearance. It wasn't a firewall issue, it wasn't DNS routing. It was the system itself saying, I don't recognize you anymore. See, the core modules I'd written in year 1 were wrapped in custom encryption layers that required regular authentication handshakes. Legacy access keys expired weeks ago, and the rotation protocol? Let's just say I was the only one who ever maintained that schedule. HR might have killed my email, but they never touched the infrastructure because they didn't even know where it lived. 11:07 a.m. Chase stormed into the server room like a televangelist trying to cast out demons. Just reboot it, he barked at Kevin. You want me to reboot the production environment? Kevin asked, looking like a hostage. Yes, clear the cache, reset the containers. We don't use containerization for the core modules, someone mumbled. Then delete whatever's blocking access. By this point, Chase was yelling at server racks like they'd personally insulted his mother. Kevin went pale, staring at the terminal outputs, timestamps blinking, access loops failing, fallback credentials spinning like a car stuck in mud. By 11:28, sales got their first angry call from a Fortune 500 client. Someone in procurement couldn't verify shipping manifests. The portal had glitched out and defaulted to a 2017 interface that looked like digital archaeology. Then came finance. Then legal compliance. Then operations started tracing the logs upstream, and that's when the real panic began. Because there was no upstream. The authentication server that all those requests ultimately flowed through, the code base that determined where and how data moved, was unreachable. Not deleted, just isolated, wrapped in an invisibility cloak made of red tape and bad assumptions. By noon, a third of our client base couldn't access their dashboards. A quarter couldn't authenticate at all. The internal chat logs were melting down. Who changed the core routing? Why is the encryption different? Who approved this update? Did Jim leave credentials documentation before he left? No, just some binder. That last message came from Kevin. He meant the red leather binder, had no idea what was actually in it. I ordered another whiskey. It was going to be a good day. Chase stormed back to his office, steam practically coming out his ears. His assistant tried to hand him a status tablet. He slapped it away. I want all hands on this. Find the last person who touched those modules. Sir, Kevin said carefully, poking his head in the doorway. That would have been Jim. Silence. Chase sat down slowly, fingers hovering over his laptop before dropping to his sides. The infrastructure map on his screen had holes in it. Entire branches of the codebase grayed out like phantom limbs. The internal admin panel displayed access revoked, but nobody knew who'd revoked it because technically it was never theirs to revoke in the first place. From Murphy's Bar, I refreshed our internal status dashboard. Still had read-only access thanks to an oversight buried deep in the legacy authentication system. Request failures, 2,647. System timeouts, 1,203. Root access attempts, 47. Successes, 0. A notification popped up on my laptop. Jeff confirming our call at 2 p.m. with a short message. Reviewed your docs. If accurate, they're about to have a very bad afternoon. I ordered another whiskey. Things were going exactly as planned. Back at headquarters, Chase ordered another system reset. The computers laughed in his face. 12:52 p.m. General Counsel tried to push an emergency patch to bypass the failing authentication modules. One of those legal Hail Mary moves where you throw paperwork at a technical problem and hope something sticks. It didn't stick. Instead, the system threw up a legal stop sign. Unauthorized access attempt logged. Primary license holder verification required. Patch request denied under operating agreement. Registered owner, Patterson Systems LLC. Patterson, not Holloway, not TechFlow. Me, See, back when we were broke and desperate, I'd incorporated a separate development shell, Patterson Systems, to house the IP. Standard practice for independent contractors. The plan was always to transfer ownership later, once we had real lawyers and proper funding. They even thanked me for keeping things clean and professional. That's how naive they were. Nobody ever circled back to close that loop, because why would they? I was loyal. I was one of the good ones. The kind you could count on to work weekends and never ask for equity, until I wasn't there anymore. So when General Counsel tried to patch the failing system, the computers called out the one name nobody had spoken in 6 hours. Mine. That's when the nuclear phone tree lit up. Legal called IT. IT called operations. Operations called HR. And HR, with sweaty palms and twitchy email fingers, finally called Chase. "Sir, we have a problem." Chase, red-faced and foaming corporate ego, marched into the conference room they'd converted from a design studio. The original founder's portrait stared down from the wall, back when they had more hair and fewer ulcers. "What do you mean Jim owns the code?" Kevin slid his laptop across the table. "Not the code exactly. The shell company, the licensing environment, the executable framework that governs system access. Everything routes through Patterson Systems, which he owns, which we never officially acquired or merged." Chase blinked like someone trying to read an eye chart backwards. General Counsel, pale and sweating through his collar, cleared his throat. "There's also Clause 7.3 from the original agreement. Licensing rights remain with the author until transferred or renegotiated in writing. It's never been renegotiated. You're telling me he owns our software? I'm telling you we never stopped him from owning it." Silence fell like a coffin lid. Then someone whispered what everyone was thinking. Why the hell didn't we update the assignment clause? That's when the founder called in. Not physically. He was at his vineyard in Napa, mid-sip of something that cost more than most people's cars. But his voice crackled through the speakerphone like divine wrath. "What do you mean Jim owns the platform?" Chase tried to spin it. "It's a temporary permissions error. He built it in our offices. We had an understanding." "Don't tell me about understandings. Tell me who signed the transfer documents." "Nobody had, because nobody ever did. The founder lost it completely. You let him walk out with the skeleton key to a $500 million empire and didn't think to check if we actually owned the damn thing?" In the background, you could hear expensive wine hitting concrete. Perfect soundtrack. Legal started scrambling. They drafted retroactive assignments, Googled California LLC seizure protocols like first-year law students cramming for finals. Someone printed a list of users with elevated access, hoping to find a backdoor. But there was no backdoor. They'd never understood what they were firing. They thought they were trimming fat. But I wasn't decorative. I was structural. Every update, every security patch, every compliance check, it all flowed through Patterson Systems. They'd built their empire around a skeleton they didn't own, and now the bones were walking out the door. By 2:15 p.m., a second government client called to report contract compliance issues. That triggered an automated federal audit notice. By 2:28, an investor group started calling the founder directly. At 2:35, Chase's assistant brought him a handwritten note, her handwriting shaking. "You need to fix this, now." He looked up at General Counsel. "Do we know where he is?" "I think," the lawyer said carefully, "he's lawyering up." They had no idea I was already in Jeff's office, working on our second round of bourbon. My phone finally came back to life at 3:07 p.m. I powered it on for exactly one reason, to retrieve the two-factor authentication code Jeff needed to access the document signing portal. The moment the screen lit up, notifications exploded like digital fireworks. Voicemails, 35. Text messages, 67. Missed calls, 89. I didn't read a single one. The phone buzzed again, blocked number. Then again, then again. Like the device itself was possessed by the ghost of Chase's failing empire. I muted it, flipped it face down on Jeff's desk, and went back to reading the licensing agreement we'd just drafted. Clean, surgical, beautiful in its simplicity. Jeff leaned back in his leather chair, swirling his bourbon. "They're melting down, aren't they? Like a chocolate bar on hot asphalt." The best part? We hadn't even made our demands yet. Jeff's office building sat downtown, the kind of place where elevator buttons felt expensive, and the receptionist offered sparkling water like she knew you were buying something significant. I walked in just after 9 a.m. the next morning. No rush, no stress, hair combed for the first time in months. I looked like what I was, a man who no longer had anything to prove. Jeff greeted me with that same measured smile he'd maintained since law school. Cool, precise, the kind of attorney who read contracts backwards and found typos in DNA sequences. His assistant led me into the glass conference room where a thick-bound packet sat on the table, tabbed and highlighted in surgical yellow. "We're ready," Jeff said. "They called 6 times since midnight. Same question every time. What does he want?" I pulled out my red leather binder and set it beside their proposal packet. Perfect symmetry. What do I want? Simple. Fair terms. The agreement was clean. 3-year exclusive license, $75 million up front, 10% royalties on every new client using Patterson Systems architecture. Full advisory position with board-level authority over technical decisions. No dilution, no replacement, no corporate restructuring without my approval. "I'm not coming back to code," I told Jeff. "I'm coming back to protect what I built. They can paint it any color they want, but nobody rewires the foundation without me in the room." He nodded, flipping through pages. "They'll push back on the royalties and board authority. They're welcome to rebuild from scratch," I said. "Should only take 15-20 years. Jeff raised an eyebrow at Clause 14. It wasn't about money. It was about respect. TechFlow Systems will issue a formal public acknowledgement that James Patterson's departure resulted from internal miscommunication, not performance issues. The statement will include recognition of Mr. Patterson's role as primary architect of the company's core technology platform." "And Chase?" Jeff asked. "Clause 15, I said. Effective immediately upon agreement execution, Chase Holloway will transition from CEO to strategic advisory role with no operational authority." Jeff tapped his pen against the folder. "They'll scream, then they'll pay." "They'll scream while paying," I corrected, signing the authorization page. The signature ink dried like a period at the end of a 20-year sentence. Jeff gathered the documents with military efficiency. "They'll have this within the hour." I grabbed my jacket. "Good, I'm going for a drive." The emergency board meeting was called for 5 p.m. sharp, but by 4:40, most key players were already seated, sleeves rolled up, jackets ditched, eyes hollow from 24 hours of spinning their wheels in corporate quicksand. The conference room lights were too bright, the air too cold. The artisanal coffee had been replaced with whatever battery acid was left in the break room machine. They were waiting for the founder. He'd flown in from Napa on a private jet, still wearing sunglasses and what looked like golf cleats. Didn't stop to chat, just power walked through the lobby with the gait of a man who'd been told his golden goose might actually be a rental. When he entered the boardroom, nobody dared speak. Chase stood to offer a handshake. The founder walked past him like he was furniture. No words, just a leather folder slammed onto the conference table. Inside, our licensing proposal, every page printed on double-spaced letterhead, so nobody could pretend they missed anything important. He didn't ease into it. "This," the founder said into the conference mic, voice steady as a judge reading a verdict, "is James Patterson's licensing proposal." He began reading aloud, slowly, clearly, every line like a nail driven into the coffin Chase had built for himself. 3-year exclusive license, $75 million up front, 10% royalty on new installations, architectural oversight retained by Mr. Patterson, public acknowledgement of his contributions. He flipped a page. And Clause 15, immediate transition of Chase Holloway from operational authority to advisory capacity. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The founder looked up, face slightly pale, voice thinner now. He turned to the board and said it, not softly, not diplomatically, but with the stunned rage of a man discovering his mansion was built on borrowed land. "Why is our $500 million software platform in his name?" Nobody answered. Chase opened his mouth like he was about to give a TED talk on miscommunication and corporate synergy. The founder held up a hand. "Don't." Chase flinched. "Don't tell me this was clerical oversight. Don't tell me it wasn't your priority. Don't tell me he never warned you, because we have the emails, Chase, we have the Slack messages, we have the audit reports you marked as low priority." He turned back to the board. "We've already voted. Terms are accepted. Contract approved." The founder stood. "And, Chase, you're done." The silence that followed was absolute. Not a cough, not a chair squeak, not even the sound of air conditioning. Just the low hum of a conference call full of investors realizing they'd almost lost everything because one man thought legacy meant disposable. 6 months later, I stood in my old office again. Same light switch, same view, but everything had changed. The nameplate now read, James Patterson, Executive Technology Advisor. The plant in the corner had recovered nicely with proper watering. My first board meeting was in an hour. The agenda included reviewing Chase's resignation letter from his strategic advisory position. Turned out Silicon Valley wasn't interested in hiring the guy who almost lost a $500 million software company through legal negligence. The monthly royalty checks had started arriving like clockwork. $3.2 million last month alone, thanks to 8 new Fortune 500 clients who'd signed on after our infrastructure modernization program. Funny how much confidence customers had when they knew the original architect was back in charge. My phone buzzed. Text from my daughter. Dad, saw the Tech World article about you. Veteran engineer returns to guide industry leader. Pretty cool for the world's okayest dad. I smiled and typed back. Turns out okay was good enough. Through my window I could see the parking lot where I'd sat in my truck that first day. Phone buzzing with 89 missed calls I never returned. Now those same people nodded respectfully when I walked past their cubicles. Not because they feared me, but because they finally understood what they'd almost lost. I didn't need revenge. I just needed them to remember who built the house they were living in. And every month, when that royalty check hit my account, they remembered all over again. The light switch clicked on one more time. After 20 years, I was finally home,